That's Dickinson and Dowd. And the 1860-71 census list confirmed Yorubas, Congos, and Igbos to be the largest in number, but they also recognized Mandingos, Fulas, and Hausas. Joseph Holloway argues that the homogeneity of the Bantu culture, that is the Congos, and the strong similarity among Bantu languages meant that the Congos influenced West African groups of larger sizes. Indeed, when the slaver Heroina was wrecked off Abaco and her cargo of 400 slaves from the Congo arrived in Nassau, many of the Congos in New Providence went to see them and inquired from what locality they had come and whether they knew anything about their families in Angola from the Baptist missionary. The touching story is told, this is like with the arrival of the Heroina in New Providence. The touching story is told of one woman from the Congo who had arrived 20 years earlier, who was sister among the group of new arrivals, and another who found her niece. Are you saying something? Oh, all right. So, a list of settled Africans going to meet new arrivals, in this case the Congos, sets a level of mutual eligibility, languages, therefore greater in the emerging Creole. It would also seem that the Yoruba Bibles suggest literacy among the Yorubas and a shared written language despite the extensive number of languages in the Benue-Congo family languages. The contact position of the liberated Africans was different to that from Africa or the Loyalist period, and this resulted in rates and processes of linguistic acculturization. For the new Africans, their identities with social institutions had African ethnic associations were moved from the colonial of Nassau. So not only by higher level African-centered culture and language influenced CE or colonial English dialects, their emerging BCE, Bahamian Creole English, was possibly more Africanized than the Bahamian Creole English spoken by the former slaves. So in a way I'm talking about like a period of re-Africanization with the arrival of the liberated Africa. Very likely Bahamian Creole English became a lingua franca at home. They used their native languages, and as their Bahamian-born children, they spoke a more Bahamian Creole than that of the 18th century, greatly influenced by those languages by the predominant ethnicities of the liberated Africans, namely Yoruba, Congo, Igbo, and Hausa. And it seemed that their linguistic process in acquiring the Bahamian Creole English as the adults was slowly were adults. I mean, inspire a new language if we are young. So the more first language affects the new language that we're. So I'm suggesting a contact situation which would motivate the acquisition of a more African ever before to some re-creolizing Bahamian Creole English. The influence of the liberated about this, I'm saying in the islands because we have settlements on the islands that have been designated liberated Africans and emancipated. Presumably on some islands they would be exposed to the Creole emerging from the Loyalist and new African slaves, and on the settlements which would create the same language dynamic as that in the New Providence African village. I don't want to say that there's been no research done on these. I do have to recognize Darius' research on settlements. I think he includes Grand Bahama, Bimini, and Abaco. Yeah. So anyway, in conclusion, the close examination of Bahamian society in the 18th and 19th century reveals a contact situation between African arrivals and local varieties of English Creole, typical of that in the plantation islands. Period, African spoken English dialect in some localities, and in others we see the genesis of Bahamian Creole English, no matter how constrained. In the Loyalist period, the new arrivals from Africa have ready access to the Gullah Creole spoken by the Loyalist slaves, and therefore acquire a re-Creolized version of Gullah. And in the 19th century, the liberated Africans sustained their African languages in the African villages for a longer period of time than earlier arrivals. and acquire a more Africanized version of Bahamian Creole English. The maritime economy and small subsistence farms did not require large numbers and created a significantly different dynamic between master and slave, which in turn gave Bahamian Creole English its distinctive patterns and made it a unique language system in the Americas. Thank you very much. Did I acknowledge you, Jim? You will notice that most of the slides, well, the perfect slides, were designed with great patience by my husband, all right? The slides that are, yes,